Welcome to Real Talk in ELT, the podcast that talks about the reality of teaching English.
Another episode of Real Talk in ELT. It's Kelly. I'm here by myself today. Hang on, let me situate. And I just gave a training to a group of teachers, and I'd like to. How do I even start with this? Well, I'm opening it up here. I'd like to kind of reflect on it a little bit. So the session was about teaching adult learners and some implications for that. And as all of the people that were in my training session were adults, I thought it would be interesting to make them feel a little uncomfortable. And by that, I mean, I've been looking into this idea of teaching adult learners and what that means and some of the implications of it. And we started the session with defining adulthood, where they did a practical activity together and were able to talk to each other because, of course, I want this to be useful and collaborative. And then, so they came up with some definitions and I gave them some information about the way that some people divide adulthood, the stages of adulthood. There's a really cool reference. Fales in 1989 was making the suggestion that instead of defining it only by ages, that we should define it a little bit in terms of some of the associated tasks or experiences that happen with those stages, in terms of separating from family, provisional adulthood, transitioning and stabilizing, then transitioning again and restabilizing, preparation for retirement, et cetera, life after working, right? So that part was fine, and I think it was not really an issue. However, then I went into the second section of the training, and I wanted the participants to feel how our students feel sometimes when we don't make accommodations specifically for adult learners. And there are some, let me just preface this. So there are some physiological and psychosocial characteristics of adult learners that impact the learning environment, impact motivation, impact lots of things. So what I did was I looked at the recommendations. I have some literature on it. I was looking at articles and kind of composed these lists of facts and things that happen both physiologically and socio-emotionally with adults. And I did everything wrong. So I did the opposite of what I should be doing. And I put the participants through a session that was just me rattling off stats and talking really quickly and not letting them participate. There was no problem solving whatsoever. There was no solutions given, no relation to their own teaching practice, to their own reality. These slides were set up in a way that was not conducive for adult learners or learners with any sort of vision problems. It was white background with black writing and just very small text and very glaring screens. And I did everything wrong, right, on purpose. And then they had a jigsaw reading activity where they needed to read about a theory or a model of adult learning. And it was very dense. The materials were, again, black and white. Nothing was highlighted in terms of, nothing was changing fonts, changing font sizes to draw attention. Everything was wrong on purpose. And so they went through these two sections of me just hammering out information and them having a relatively quick time limit to do a jigsaw reading, share their ideas. And afterwards, I posed the question to them: how did they feel about the training? The training wasn't over yet, so I think they were a little confused that I was asking, well, how's the session going so far? And they're adorable and wonderful. And I know some of these teachers like on a more intimate level, working with them a little bit more closely. And they're kind, and they said, "Oh, yeah, there's a lot of information. It's very interesting. I was reflecting while you were talking. There's some things that I hadn't considered, blah, blah, blah." Just being very kind and trying to give positive feedback. And what I wanted to reassure them was, when something is shit, let's just label it as terrible. Shit is shit, right? And they started looking confused and uncomfortable. And I said, "Listen, guys, I gave you that section of the session not using any of the principles and information and ideas that I was trying to deliver to you. And how did you feel?" And then they got it. And they felt horrible. And they felt really, really terrible. And one of the participants said that she felt as if she was stupid. Actually, two of them did. They felt as if they were stupid, if they weren't able to keep up. The pace was really fast. One of them said that she was having two of them. Yeah, I think two of them said that they were having difficulty concentrating on the screen and getting the information from the. And I did all of this on purpose, but they were trying to be kind. And so I think that we need to recognize when things are bad, things are just bad, right? And we need to start thinking about how our learners are feeling in these scenarios. So they got a firsthand taste of how it feels when teachers who are teaching adults who either lack information about what it means to teach adults or lack initiative for adapting and trying to make a more conducive learning environment. They got a firsthand feeling or they got a firsthand experience of how that feels. And I can say that they did not like it. And that's a good thing. Of course, I'd never want people to feel uncomfortable. And they have access to all of the information and everything afterwards. So they'll be able to go back and really reflect on things and interact and engage with the materials on a deeper level. But the exercise was not only for them to see the information, the exercise was really for them to understand how important it is for teachers to take consideration of certain aspects, whether it be physiological in terms of the way that things are presented, because vision can cause problems with older adult students. Our vision deteriorates. It's just a part of aging. Whether it's thinking about how we give things in an auditory fashion, whether if we're speaking as teachers or if we're playing audios, the health of someone, if they're having problems in their family or physical problems, things like that, it affects their reaction in the classroom. One of the participants said she just started sweating because she was so anxious about it, and she felt as if she was going to feel stupid talking to her peer about the information, and she didn't want that person to feel as if they weren't getting enough from the session because they were talking to her. I mean, that's such an impactful experience to have, because can you imagine how your students must feel in some of those scenarios if we don't take into consideration that these things are happening, and we need to adapt the classroom so that people feel comfortable and learning can actually happen in the classroom. So yes, so we went through some of those things. And then we wrapped up the session with some reflection, some discussion. We looked at a learner profile and looked at some materials and started thinking about, okay, so what considerations do we have to start making? And one thing came up at the end of the session. One of the participants asked if there was a suggested list of do's and don'ts. And the whole idea behind teaching adults, I would posit to say teaching children too, but I don't have a lot of experience into that, and I haven't investigated it, so I can't really dig into it as much as I would like. But is that teaching adults is complex, because there is no stereotypical or prototype adults because they're accumulation of their experiences. And because they are accumulation of their experiences and everybody's in a different situation, it's not to say that we need to customize every single piece of material. No, but there are some universal truths and some general guidelines that we should look at in terms of delivering lessons for adults. And so there's not a do or don't list. And I think that if you do find a do or don't list, like a hard black and white list, I would be very, very skeptical of that list. And I would approach it with a lot of caution, because you can tell that my neighbors are not actually adults because it's just funk playing in the background. I apologize. Apparently, they're testing their radio system out. The sound system in the car is functioning. Not everybody needs to hear it. So I would say that if you do find a do's and don'ts list, a black and white list of what you need to do and what you can't do, be very skeptical of that, because what we're finding is that in multidisciplinary areas is that we don't know. We know some, but we don't know everything, and we certainly don't know a lot. There's a lot of information, and we're still trying to, go through what it means to learn, how adults process things. We have a lot of information on that, so I would say that use that as a guide, but just know that we don't have absolute truths yet, and therefore we need to start thinking, okay, well, this is what we know so far, and this is what's proven by science, backed by literature, has been tested, and we can verify this information. So that would be a good starting point. But that humanity is very, very complex. Learning and the brain is very, very complex. And so we need to take all of those things into with a grain of salt, right? So we can't just say, okay, so this is what they found X number of years ago, and that's it, and I'm never going to investigate this further. No, we have to continually update and check and revisit our ideas of what learning is and what's happening in especially in universities and laboratories and in science, that gives us more insight into how we can deliver effective classes. So that would be my first recommendation. Obviously, there's literature out there about adult learning. There's many components, many factors that play into it, both psychosocially, psychologically. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't get into that. Physiologically, we have some components that are important. And all of this came to me, the idea of doing a terrible session and making people comfortable enough to say, Kelly, that was really bad, which they weren't comfortable in saying, was that there is this pervasive idea in this attitude that's going on, that everything that everybody does is amazing. And if people are trying, then we need to make sure that we acknowledge and celebrate their attempts. Not all attempts and not all tries and not all workshops and not all materials and books and courses and what. Not everything is great. Some things are just terrible. And we need to start calling what is terrible, what is shit. If it's shit, let's call it shit. Sorry, it's not, if it's not good enough, then it's just not good enough. It's not saying that the person is bad. It's saying that maybe the way that something was delivered, the way that something was developed, the way that something is presented was not conducive for its purposes, whether it be in the classroom or in training sessions. So if something doesn't work, it just doesn't work. But if we continually try to to have this toxic positivity. That's what I'm going to call it. Toxic positivity, where everything is wonderful and everyone's attempts to do things. By the way, I am also including myself in this scenario because I don't think everything that I put out is great. I don't think everything that I talk about or that I have an opinion on is correct. I'm trying to figure it out as I go. And I know that I'm going to make mistakes. I know that I'm going to say things now. And in 10 or 20 years, I'm going to look back and be like, oh my God, you know what? I'm going to look back in 10 minutes and think to myself, I wish I hadn't had said that, but that's okay because I'm working with the information that I have now, the knowledge that I have now. So instead of celebrating everything, because if everything has value, nothing has value, let's start thinking about providing, developing, and doing things and giving honest, constructive criticism and good feedback. Because what I see nowadays as a general tendency is that we have to be supportive of everyone. If you're giving constructive criticism, it's not that you're not supporting. That's the best way of supporting people, to tell people, listen, I understand what your objective was here, whether it be in a lesson, whether it be in academic paper or writing, whether it be in delivering workshops or webinars. The most respect that you can give somebody is to be honest with them and say, that's not what I was expecting this. You gave this. There was miscommunication here. We need to revisit this in some way. Or I expected more, and here's why. Or this doesn't help me, and here's why. And it's not that we're being critical of the person, it's that we need to just communicate better. And if something is not great, or if something is, I'll give you a concrete example instead of being so abstract. If I give a workshop, and for example, today, I don't know if that workshop was helpful for people because my main objective was for them to look at some of the critical and important characteristics of adult learners and to also have the experience of feeling when something is not developed for you with considerations taken. How does that feel as a learner in that situation? I don't know if that was the expectation of those teachers that sat here for an hour and a half with me this morning. And if it wasn't, I would like to know that. And if they walked away from that session with more questions than answers, what are those questions? And how can I help you with that? Do you see what I'm saying? So we need to start calling a spade a spade. Like, it is what it is. And the only way that we can actually move this profession forward is if people just start getting really honest and giving constructive criticism. And when you're receiving the criticism, know that it's not about you, it's about what you delivered and how it wasn't aligned with the expectations of the person. Now, sometimes the expectations of the person are a little crazy. And sometimes what you described something as wasn't as accurate or as clear as you should have made it to be. But again, we have to open these lines of dialogue so that when we see something, we say, okay, great. I like this. This was great. This was super helpful. I liked this. What you lost me here. So next time, if you ever do this webinar workshop again, consider making adjustments here as well, because it would have been helpful for me to have this information, or it would have been helpful for me to dig into this a little bit more, or have a practical activity as opposed to a discussion, etc. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to leave you with. This was my experience giving my most recent workshop. I loved it. The people, I really enjoyed it. I feel as if people understood what I was trying to do. However, I encourage anyone that participated to talk to me afterwards and let me know if it really met your expectations and if you feel fully supported with the materials afterwards, because I think that's the only way that I'm going to get better as a teacher, as a teacher educator. And I would really like to help people in that regard. So, yes. If it's shit, people, just say that it's shit and and just have an honest conversation about it. To be honest, I won't be offended. I have relatively thick skin. Don't attack me personally. Attack and don't attack in general, but give constructive criticism. I was expecting this. This is what I felt was delivered. Here's what I felt would have been helpful for me, et cetera, because that's the only way we can make things better. That's going to be it for me today. So be reflective of that, not only for teacher training sessions, but also think about that in your classrooms. How often do you get real, honest feedback from your students about whether or not the classes are productive and whether or not they're leaving with a good, firm grasp on what you want them to leave the classroom with? And how can you facilitate that dialogue, that honest dialogue of, nope, it is what it is, and let's fix what's wrong, improve what's weak, and move forward. And keep doing the things that are great, obviously, because it's not only about bad things. We need to focus on, this worked really well, so let's keep doing this. Okay, that's it now. See everybody later. Bye.
Ready to join the conversation? Head on over to Instagram at Kelly Pennington ELT and send me a message. That's it for now. Take care of yourself, your health, your vibe, and your tribe. Until next time.